The city was quiet that evening. The sun had gone down, and the sky was turning dark. Inside one of the tallest buildings in the city, the lights were still on at the very top floor. Austin sat behind his large glass desk, staring at a white envelope lying in front of him. He had been staring at it for the past 20 minutes, not saying a word. He was alone. The office was quiet, too quiet. His workers had all gone home for the weekend, but Austin stayed behind not because of work, but because of that envelope. He didn't want to open it again, but something in his chest made him do it. Slowly, he reached for the envelope, opened it, and pulled out the card inside. It was a wedding invitation. You are invited to the wedding of Linda Grace and Mr. Edward Harris. Venue, the Crystal Garden Hotel. Austin's eyes didn't blink. He just sat there staring at the names. Linda Grace, the woman he once loved more than anything in the world, the woman he had planned to marry. The woman who left him without a reason. Austin wasn't just any man. He was Austin Cole, one of the most talked about billionaires in the country. He made his fortune through mobile finance technology, building an app that helped millions of people send, save, and manage money with just their phones. He started from a small apartment, working day and night. Now he owned buildings, cars, and even a private jet. He was tall, with smooth brown skin, a clean beard, and sharp eyes that always seemed to be thinking. People often said he looked like he walked out of a fashion magazine, but Austin didn't care much about appearances. He wore simple shirts, neat suits, and never tried to impress anyone. Still, everywhere he went, people noticed him. But what many didn't know was that Austin had a quiet heart. He didn't like noise. He didn't like drama. He didn't chase fame. He only wanted peace and someone to share it with. He thought that person was Linda. 1 year ago, they were planning a future. He had bought a ring and was ready to propose. Then, just like that, she was gone. No warning, no fight, no explanation. Just a short text message that said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." It broke something inside him. He didn't cry in public, he didn't beg, he simply went silent, and he buried himself in his work. For the past year, he stayed away from the spotlight. He avoided cameras. He turned down interviews. All he did was build, grow, and focus. But now, out of nowhere, she had returned into his life. Not in person, but through this invitation. And she was getting married to Mr. Edward Harris, a much older man. A man known not only for his money, but for his control over powerful people. Some called him a businessman. Others called him something else. Austin didn't care who she married. He had made peace with her leaving. But sending him this invite? That wasn't peace. That was pride. That was a message. Look at me now. He could already picture the cameras at the wedding. Reporters whispering, "There's Austin. Alone. Look at Linda. She upgraded." Austin clenched his jaw. He would not let that happen. If Linda wanted a show, then fine. He would give her a show she would never forget. But this time, he would be the one holding the script. A few days after Austin received the invitation, it was Saturday afternoon. The sun was hot, and the city was buzzing with life. Austin didn't feel like being indoors. His mind was still heavy from the wedding invitation, so he stepped out of his car and walked down the street alone, trying to clear his head. He wore dark sunglasses and a plain black shirt. No one recognized him. That's how he liked it. No bodyguards, no noise, just fresh air and quiet thoughts. As he passed a small bakery, something caught his eye. A young woman was sitting on the ground, leaning against the bakery wall. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and her clothes were worn out and dusty. A small bag sat beside her, half open. She didn't look like she had much, but she didn't look sad either. She was eating a meat pie slowly, as if it was the best thing in the world. There was a calmness in her eyes, a kind of peace. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She just watched people pass by like she had seen it all before. Austin stopped walking. Something about her made him pause. She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked with a little smirk. "Never seen a woman eat before?" Her voice was sharp, but not rude. It had humor in it. Austin chuckled. "I've seen plenty of people eat," he said, "just not with so much joy." Vanessa raised one eyebrow. "That's because most people don't know how to enjoy anything anymore. They have food, but no peace." Austin tilted his head. "And you? You have peace?" She nodded and wiped her hand on her skirt. "Yes. Peace, meat pie, and a good spot in the shade. Life is not so bad." He smiled. "What's your name?" "Why? Are you writing a book?" she asked, still chewing. He laughed again. "No, just trying to have a conversation." She stared at him for a few seconds. Then she smiled. "Vanessa?" "Austin," he replied, stretching out his hand. She looked at it but didn't shake it. "I know who you are," she said. "Austin Cole, the finance app guy. Rich, quiet." Austin raised his brow. "You know a lot for someone sitting on the street." "I listen," she said simply. "And people talk, especially when they think you're invisible." There was silence for a moment. Austin looked at her differently now. She wasn't just any homeless woman. She was sharp, she was bold, and she didn't seem ashamed of anything. He sat on the bench near her and said, "So, Vanessa, what are you doing next Saturday?" Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "Why? You planning to give me a mansion?" "No," Austin smiled. "Just a wedding." She scoffed. "You want to take me to a wedding?" He nodded. "Let me guess. Your ex is getting married and you want to make her jealous." Austin blinked. "Wow." "Don't wow me," she said, picking at the last bite of her pie. "That storyline is older than my shoes." Then she looked at him more closely. "Don't you have a new girlfriend or something? A model? An actress? Some rich, shiny lady to take with you? Why a homeless woman like me?" Austin's smile faded a little. He looked down, then looked at her and said quietly, "I haven't been in any relationship since Linda left. I'm not seeing anyone." Vanessa raised her eyebrows. "So you're really just taking a stranger off the street to a rich people's wedding?" He laughed and shook his head. "I guess I am." She smirked. "You must be very desperate." Austin laughed louder. "Yeah, maybe I am." She leaned back and looked at him with a playful grin. "You're lucky I have nothing better to do," she said. "I'll come, but don't expect me to behave." Austin smiled widely. "I wouldn't dream of it." They both laughed. And just like that, the show had found its leading lady. The next morning, Austin's black car pulled up in front of the same bakery. Vanessa was already sitting there, her small bag by her side as if she had been waiting. She stood up and dusted off her skirt. "So, Rich Boy really came back," she said with a small smile. Austin opened the car door for her. "I told you I would." Vanessa slid into the car slowly, looking around the interior like she had seen it all before. "Smells like money in here," she said. Austin smiled. "That's just the leather." They didn't talk much on the ride. The car moved smoothly through the city streets until it stopped in front of a tall building with glass walls and golden doors. The sign above read, "Maison d'Elise," one of the most expensive salons in the city. Vanessa stared at the building and blinked. "You're not serious?" "I told you," Austin said, stepping out. "If you're coming with me, we're doing it right." They walked in together. The moment they stepped inside, heads turned. Stylists, customers, and even the receptionist paused, not because they recognized Austin, but because of Vanessa. She didn't look like she belonged. Her clothes were old, her hair was wild, and her sandals were falling apart. But her posture, calm. Her expression, unbothered. She stood like someone who had nothing to prove. Austin leaned toward the front desk. "We have an appointment. Full makeover. Her name is Vanessa." The woman behind the desk nodded quickly and called two stylists. Vanessa was led gently to a private room upstairs. They gave her a robe, asked her to change, and began their work. Her hair was washed, deep conditioned, trimmed, and styled into soft curls. Her nails were cleaned and painted. Her face was touched with light makeup, just enough to highlight her eyes, her cheekbones, her full lips. Austin waited in the lounge, flipping through a magazine but barely seeing anything on the page. After almost 3 hours, The door opened. Vanessa stepped out slowly, and everything stopped. Even the sound of the blow-dryers went quiet for a moment. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that hugged her figure perfectly. Her skin glowed, her hair bounced with every step. She walked like she owned the room, quiet, steady, strong. Austin stood up, eyes wide. He couldn't hide his shock. "You," he began, "you look like someone who belongs here?" She finished with a soft smile. He nodded. "Yeah, exactly that." The stylists behind her were still staring, whispering to each other. One of them said, "She moves like royalty." Another whispered, "She has this grace, like she's used to this life." And that's when Austin noticed it too. It wasn't just the beauty. It was the way she sat down with poise, the way she crossed her legs gently, the way she smiled without trying too hard, the way she thanked everyone softly, calling them by name even though they had just met. She wasn't acting. She fit in, too well. Austin looked at her closely. "Have you done this before?" Vanessa looked at him for a moment, then glanced out the window. "Maybe," she said quietly. "A long time ago." There was something in her voice, a hint of pain, wrapped in calm. Austin didn't ask more. But deep inside, he knew Vanessa wasn't just a homeless girl with sharp words. She was something else, something more. And now she was about to walk into Linda's wedding like a storm, dressed in silk. The soft sound of classical music played in the background as cars lined up in front of the Crystal Garden Hotel, a grand hall filled with chandeliers, gold chairs, and flowers that smelled like money. It was the kind of wedding people talked about before it even happened. Businessmen, socialites, celebrities, everyone important in the city had come. Photographers crowded the entrance. Paparazzi waited outside with cameras ready. Inside, the guests were already seated. They held drinks in their hands, smiling, gossiping, waiting for the bride and groom to appear. And then the doors opened again. A hush fell over the room. Austin walked in first, tall, calm, dressed in a deep navy blue suit that made him look like he walked straight out of a magazine. But no one was looking at him. They were looking at her, Vanessa. She walked beside him. Her earrings sparkled, and her eyes scanned the room with quiet confidence. She didn't rush. She didn't smile too much. She walked slowly, gracefully, like she belonged there more than anyone else in the room. Gasps, whispers, heads turned from all corners. Who is she? Where did she come from? She's stunning. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. Vanessa didn't blink. She just kept walking, holding onto Austin's arm gently, her chin slightly raised. From across the room, Linda saw them. Her smile faded. Her eyes narrowed just a little. She wasn't expecting this. Yes, she invited Austin to show him what he had lost. She thought he'd come alone, or maybe with some woman who tried too hard to look expensive. But this woman beside him was different. Beautiful, yes. But there was something else. Vanessa didn't look like she was trying to prove anything. She looked powerful. Linda quickly fixed her face and forced a smile, but her fingers gripped her wineglass tighter. Vanessa noticed her. She gave her a soft, unreadable smile. Not too friendly, not too cold. Just enough to say, "I see you." Austin leaned slightly toward Vanessa and whispered, "You're stealing the whole show." Vanessa whispered back without looking at him, "Good. Let her feel it." They moved through the crowd, stopping to greet a few people Austin recognized. But even those people barely heard what he said. They were too busy staring at the woman beside him. A woman no one could place, yet no one could ignore. Vanessa walked with the same ease she showed at the salon. She took a glass of juice, sat beside Austin, and crossed her legs gently. Every movement was calm, controlled, elegant. Linda kept glancing at them from across the room. Her laughter became louder, her smile more forced. She was nervous, and Vanessa saw it. Austin saw it too. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled for real. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Something had shifted. The reception hall sparkled under golden lights. Waiters moved quietly between tables, carrying trays of drinks and tiny plates of food. The music was soft, the laughter louder now. But one table had gone quiet. Vanessa was speaking. At a round table filled with top businessmen, CEOs, and 2 local politicians, she sat with her back straight, eyes steady, and voice calm. She wasn't just talking, she was teaching. "I think digital savings platforms can do more than just give access to money," she said. "They can teach responsibility. People respect what they understand." One of the men, a popular economist, nodded. "You're right. But the risk of default still scares investors." Vanessa smiled slightly. "Then maybe the problem isn't the people. Maybe it's the system they were never taught to trust." The men around her leaned in. Even Mr. Harris, sitting a few seats away, turned his head to listen. Vanessa spoke clearly about interest rates, inflation, and the future of tech in Africa. She touched on global markets and even cracked a smart joke about cryptocurrency that made the whole table laugh. Then someone brought up politics. Mr. Harris chuckled and said, "Well, we can't change corruption. It's part of the air we breathe." Vanessa turned to him, her tone still respectful but firm. "I disagree. Corruption is not air, it's a choice. And once you start believing it's normal, that's when it truly wins." The table went silent. Mr. Harris shifted slightly in his seat. "And what would someone like you know about running a country?" Vanessa looked him in the eye. "I know what it feels like when the country fails the people who trusted it." Austin watched everything from his seat, his heart full. He had brought Vanessa to prove a point. But now she was doing more than that. She was standing in a room full of powerful people, and not just surviving. She was shining. He couldn't stop looking at her. And yet, one question kept pressing in his mind. How can a woman this smart, this educated, end up on the street? His thoughts were broken by the sound of someone clearing their throat beside him. He turned. Linda. She stood beside him in her wedding gown, her fake smile tighter than ever. "Austin," she said softly. "Can we talk? Privately?" He sighed, stood up and followed her to a quiet corner of the hall. She turned to face him, her voice still sweet but colder now. "I just wanted to check on you," she said. "You've been through a lot, and I can see how desperate you must have felt. That girl, Vanessa, Austin raised an eyebrow. Linda continued, "I'm just worried she's using you. You're vulnerable, Austin. You're kind. You fall fast. What if she breaks your heart?" Austin looked at her for a long second, then took a deep breath. "You know," he said quietly. "It's funny hearing all this from the same woman who left me without a word." Linda's smile faded. "You're worried she'll break my heart?" he continued. "That's rich, coming from the one who did." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "You don't get to care now," he said, calm but firm. "You made your choice, and I've made mine. I don't know who or what made you think you have a right to interfere in my life. But let this be the last time." He turned and walked away. Back to the woman who had already changed the energy of the entire room. Vanessa didn't even know he had stepped away. She was still deep in conversation, answering a question from a young tech founder. As Austin sat beside her again, he didn't say a word. He just smiled and watched. Because at that moment, he knew the wedding was over. But the whispers about Vanessa weren't. All across the city's elite circles, people were still talking. Who is she? Where did Austin find her? Why haven't we seen her before? But even with all the noise, Vanessa stayed quiet. She didn't post pictures. She didn't speak to the press. She simply returned to wherever she had come from. But Austin couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just her beauty or the way she carried herself. It was everything she said, the way she spoke, the calm confidence, the pain hidden behind her strong smile. He needed to know more. So 2 days after the wedding, he called his assistant. "Her name is Vanessa," he said over the phone. No last name, I need to know who she really is. The assistant tried, but after 2 days of searching, he came back with one answer. Nothing. No social media, no school records, no ID under that name. It's like she doesn't exist. Austin sat in silence, staring at the city lights from his apartment balcony. The mystery only made him more curious. So he picked up his phone and sent her a message. Dinner, 7 p.m. My driver will pick you up. Vanessa arrived exactly on time. She wore a soft emerald dress, no jewelry, and her hair pulled back. Simple, elegant, just like her. They were seated in a quiet corner of Le Mirage, a high-end restaurant with candlelight and soft jazz music playing in the background. The waiter brought their drinks and disappeared. For a few minutes, they talked about nothing serious: food, weather, music. Then Austin leaned forward, his voice low and kind. Vanessa, who are you really? She didn't answer immediately. She looked at her wine glass for a moment, then lifted her eyes to meet his. Vanessa Williams, she said softly. That's my real name. Austin stayed quiet. I grew up in a house with 10 bedrooms and marble floors. We had maids, drivers, private chefs. I went to school abroad, lived in London for 5 years. He blinked, surprised. So what happened? She took a slow breath. My father, Charles Williams, was once one of the most powerful businessmen in this country. He built his company from nothing, but a few years ago he partnered with the wrong person. She looked at Austin again. Her eyes were calm but heavy. That person was Edward Harris. Austin felt his chest tighten. Vanessa continued. They started a project together, big government contracts. My father trusted him, but Harris used fake documents, moved money around, and when the investigation started, he blamed everything on my dad. Austin sat back slowly, silent. My father was arrested. He served time. We lost everything, our home, our cars, our name, and not a single person stood by him. He died in prison, heartbroken, shamed. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly, but she didn't cry. I came back with nothing. Just myself. I didn't want pity. I didn't want help. I just wanted to understand how a man like Harris could walk free and still smile in expensive suits. Austin sat there, stunned. The woman he had met on the street, the woman who had turned heads at a billionaire wedding, had once lived in a mansion and lost everything because of the very man now married to his ex. He looked at her, not with pity but with deep respect. You're stronger than you know, he said quietly. Vanessa gave him a small smile. I just wanted the truth to be seen again, even if only by one person. Austin looked at her for a long time, and in his heart, he made a silent promise. He would help her find that truth, and he would never let her carry it alone again. The restaurant was quiet as Vanessa finished her story. Austin sat across from her, no longer thinking about Linda, the wedding, or his pride. All he could think about was justice. For Vanessa. For her father. And for every lie that Edward Harris had gotten away with. Vanessa took a sip of water, then looked down at her hands. I didn't come to the wedding by accident, she said softly. Austin's eyes narrowed. You planned it? She nodded slowly. Not all of it. I saw your name on the wedding guest list. I had been watching Mr. Harris for a long time, following stories, listening to rumors, tracking the people around him. Austin leaned back in his chair. Vanessa looked up at him, her voice steady. So when you stopped in front of that bakery and talked to me, I couldn't believe it. When you asked me to come to the wedding, I said yes, because I saw a chance. Austin didn't speak right away. Then he smiled. I'm glad you took it. The next few days were quiet, but full. Austin gave Vanessa a space in his office, not to work but to think, to search and to plan. They went through old news articles, business reports, and hidden files. Austin used his influence to contact a few retired accountants who once worked under Harris. Some were afraid, but some still remembered, and they talked. Emails were found, contracts reappeared, bank transactions whispered secrets. Step by step, the truth began to rise. Vanessa worked like someone chasing light at the end of a long, dark tunnel, and Austin was right beside her. Sometimes they would sit together late into the night, papers scattered on the table, coffee growing cold beside them. Once, as Vanessa leaned over to read something on Austin's laptop, their hands touched. Neither of them moved. She looked at him. He looked at her. But nothing was said. Another time they were laughing over a hidden typo in one of Harris's fake documents. Austin leaned back, watching her laugh, and for a second, just a second, he wished time could stop. But again, no one said anything. Both of them knew something was growing between them, but both were afraid to open that door. Vanessa was still healing. Austin was still unsure. So they stayed focused on the mission, on the truth, on justice. One evening, Austin stood by the window in his office, holding a printed report in his hand. "We have everything we need now," he said. Vanessa walked over and stood beside him. "Then it's time," she said. "Time to bring it out, in front of the same people who turned their backs on my father, the same people who shook Harris's hand and believed his lies." Austin turned to her. "Are you ready?" Vanessa didn't blink. "I've been ready for years." He smiled gently. "Then let's give them a night they'll never forget." The night was cool and quiet. Soft music played from a grand piano at the center of a large hall. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, and waiters moved between tables with glasses of wine and silver trays. It was a private dinner, only for the elite. Top business leaders, investors, media executives, and public figures sat around decorated tables, smiling, laughing, unaware that the evening was about to change everything. At the far end of the room, Mr. Harris stood like a king in his castle. Linda stood beside him, shining in diamonds, her perfect smile glued in place. And then, Austin walked in. The room went silent. Right beside him, dressed in a soft cream gown, calm and graceful, was Vanessa. This time, no one whispered. They all just watched. Austin took the mic gently from the event host and walked to the front. "Good evening," he said. "Thank you for welcoming us tonight. I know this is meant to be a peaceful gathering, but sometimes peace begins with truth." People looked around, confused. A few heads turned toward Harris. Vanessa stepped forward. Her voice was soft, clear, strong. "My name is Vanessa Williams," she said. "Some of you knew my father, Charles Williams. Many of you believed he was a criminal." The room shifted. She continued, "Tonight I'm here to give you the truth you never saw, the truth you were too afraid to ask for." She pressed a small remote in her hand, and the projector behind her lit up. Emails, bank transfers, fake documents, voice recordings, signatures. One by one, the evidence appeared, and every single thread pointed to Mr. Harris, the man who had smiled for years, the man who had walked free, the man who had sent another man to prison for his own crimes. The room froze. No one laughed now. No one even moved. Harris stood in place, his face pale. Sweat gathered on his forehead. "This is a lie!" he shouted suddenly. "She's lying, she—" A deep voice cut him off. "Mr. Edward Harris," said a police officer walking through the main doors with two more behind him. "You are under arrest for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. Mr. Harris was handcuffed in front of everyone he had once controlled. As he was led away, he locked eyes with Vanessa, but she looked right through him, like he was nothing. And just like that, his empire collapsed. His friends turned their faces. His wife, Linda, stood frozen. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she walked toward Austin, heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I truly regret leaving you. I didn't know. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but I was wrong." Austin looked at her gently, but firmly. "I've moved on, Linda," he said. "I hope you find peace." She gave a small, broken nod, then turned and walked out of the hall, her dress trailing behind her like the last piece of a life that was now gone. Vanessa stood quietly by Austin's side. They didn't need to speak. Justice had spoken for them. As the guests slowly began to recover from the shock, a familiar voice came up beside Austin. It was Daniel, one of his old friends. He looked at Vanessa, then at Austin. "She's special," he said. Austin nodded. "She is." Daniel smiled and looked around. They all stood there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of a room still trying to make sense of what just happened. And for the first time in a long time, Vanessa felt light. The news spread fast. By morning, every paper carried the same headline: Business tycoon Edward Harris arrested at elite dinner. The city was in shock. Some tried to deny it. Others acted like they always knew. But one truth was clear. Vanessa had done what no one else could. And somewhere in the quiet, where there were no cameras and no flashing lights, Vanessa sat on a bench under a mango tree, smiling softly to herself. It was the first time in years that she truly felt free. Her father, Charles Williams, had died in shame. But now, the truth was out. And that shame was no longer his to carry. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You can rest now, Daddy. They know the truth." Later that evening, Austin invited her to his apartment rooftop. No fancy dinner, just soft music, a view of the city lights, and the kind of silence that feels safe. They sat beside each other, legs stretched out, a warm drink in their hands. "You did something powerful," Austin said quietly. "You stood in a room full of giants, and they all listened to you." Vanessa smiled a little. "I didn't do it for them. I did it for him, and for me." Austin turned to her. "So what now?" Vanessa looked up at the stars. "I'm not going back to the old life. I don't want pity. I don't need saving. I just want a fresh start. One I can build with my own hands." He nodded. "I can help." She looked at him gently. "Austin, I need to lead this on my own terms. If I fall, I want to know I stood first." There was silence. Then he smiled. "Fair enough. But you don't have to walk alone. I'll be here. However, you need me." Vanessa nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you." In the days that followed, Vanessa got to work. With Austin's support, but not his control, she registered a small company. A business focused on training young women in digital skills and financial literacy. She called it The Root, because every strong tree starts there. Austin helped her rent an office space, but she decorated it herself. Nothing fancy, just clean, warm, and full of life. They spent more time together, not as a couple, but as two people learning to breathe again. They shared stories, scars, dreams. One night, she told him how she used to paint when she was little. Another night, he told her how silence kept him from going crazy after Linda left. They laughed sometimes, but mostly they just sat in peace. Austin felt something deep for Vanessa. Not just attraction, respect. She was fire and calm, storm and stillness, a woman who had been broken but refused to stay that way. And though he wanted more, wanted to hold her hand and call her his, he didn't rush. He stayed her friend. Because love, he knew, was not always loud. Sometimes it was just showing up. The days passed slowly, peacefully. Vanessa's small business began to grow. She trained a few girls from the local shelter, taught them how to manage money, how to build a brand, and how to believe in themselves again. Austin watched from a quiet corner, never interfering, only offering help when she asked. He had never felt this way before. It wasn't like the whirlwind with Linda, loud dinners, fast cars, headlines. This was different. With Vanessa, everything was quiet and deep. It was in the way she listened, the way she stood her ground, the way she still made him nervous sometimes, like he had to be a better man just to stand beside her. He had tried to keep his feelings hidden, but they only grew stronger. So one evening, just as the sun dipped below the skyline, he asked her to go for a walk. They walked slowly down a quiet path behind her office. "I've been meaning to say something," Austin said, rubbing his hand against the back of his neck. Vanessa looked at him. Say it. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I want to be with you, he said, not just as your friend. I want more. I'm falling for you, Vanessa. She looked at him quietly. I know it started strange. And yes, I was hurting when Linda invited me to that wedding. It was a slap. I felt small. But that was before I knew you. His voice was steady. You're not a distraction. You're not a rebound. You're someone I admire. Deeply. Vanessa looked away, her arms crossed gently in front of her. You say that now, she said softly. But what if you're just trying to fill the space Linda left? What if you're chasing peace through me? Austin shook his head. I chased peace alone. You brought me truth. She didn't respond. I get it, he continued. You've been hurt. You've had your world flipped upside down. You don't owe me anything, but I had to be honest about how I feel. Vanessa sighed. Austin, I'm not afraid of loving you, she said. I'm afraid of losing myself inside someone. He nodded slowly. Then don't lose yourself. I don't want you to become anyone else. I just want to stand beside you, as you are. They started spending more time together, but now with small shifts. She let him hold her hand sometimes. He brought her coffee in the morning without asking. They still talked like friends, but they laughed like lovers. Some nights, she would fall asleep with her head on his shoulder. But every time he moved too fast, asking her to move in with him from her small, run-down house, Vanessa pulled back. Let me breathe. I'm very comfortable at my place. It's better than my initial homelessness, she would say. And Austin would always nod, because love, to him now, wasn't about holding tightly. It was about holding right. But it wasn't perfect. There were moments when Austin's jealousy showed, especially when people praised Vanessa too loudly, or when her old male classmates dropped by to say hello. Relax, she would say, looking him in the eye. I chose you. And in those moments, Austin would pause. He'd take a deep breath. And remember, this woman didn't want to be owned. She wanted to be understood. So he stepped back when needed. He showed up when it mattered. And day by day, she began to trust that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't break her heart. Vanessa never meant to fall in love. She had built strong walls around her heart, not out of pride but survival. She had lost too much, trusted too easily, been disappointed too deeply. But somehow, slowly, Austin had found his way in. He didn't force the door open. He waited outside until she felt safe enough to let him in. And one quiet morning, as they sat drinking tea in her small office space, she looked at him and realized her walls were gone. All of them. She had fallen in love, fully, deeply, honestly. To celebrate the growth of the root, Austin invited her on a short vacation. Nothing fancy, he said. Just rest. Just you and me. They traveled to a quiet beach town where the sand was soft and the ocean sang lullabies all day long. No cameras, no pressure, just laughter, long walks, and sunsets. Vanessa wore simple dresses. Austin wore loose shirts and sandals. They ate roasted fish by the fire. They danced barefoot under the stars. And one evening, as the sun began to sink into the sea, Austin led her to a small spot where petals covered the sand. He stood there, heart racing, holding something behind his back. Vanessa looked confused. What are you doing? Austin dropped to one knee, not fast, not dramatic, but gentle, like a man sure of what he wanted. I'm not here to rescue you, he said. You don't need saving. You never did. He took out a simple ring. I just want to walk with you, through every season, every storm, every sunrise. Vanessa's lips trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not because of pain, but because for the first time in her life, she felt seen. She bent down slowly, held his face in her hands and whispered, Yes, yes, Austin, I love you. And he held her tight, right there on the sand, Wrapped in the soft wind, two souls healed by love found their way home. The wedding came weeks later. It wasn't loud, it was simple. A quiet garden, close friends, soft music, and fresh flowers everywhere. Vanessa wore an off-white gown that shimmered in the sunlight. Her hair curled softly behind her shoulders. She walked down the aisle, not like a bride desperate for a new life, but like a woman walking into her own. Austin stood waiting, his eyes never leaving hers. When they said, "I do," there were no fireworks, just tears, laughter, and a long, deep hug that held all the pieces of their past and every promise of their future. Their kiss wasn't loud, but it was real. And that day, two hearts broken by different battles came together, not as rescue and rescued, but as equals, as partners, as home. The rain tapped gently on the windows that morning. Vanessa stood in the bathroom, staring at the small white test in her hand. 2 pink lines. Her heart raced. She sat down slowly, both hands over her mouth. She was pregnant. She waited until dinner to tell Austin. They sat in their living room, curled up on the couch, barefoot, sharing a bowl of fruit and laughter. "I have something to tell you," she said softly. Austin turned to her, already smiling. "Good news or bad?" She placed his hand on her belly. "Good, really, really good." He blinked, then blinked again. "No way." She nodded, eyes already full of happy tears. Austin burst into laughter. He pulled her into a hug so tight she couldn't even breathe. "You're serious?" he asked again. She nodded into his chest. And together they laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from deep joy, from healing, from knowing that life had given them something they never saw coming. Later that night, as they stood by the window watching the rain, Vanessa whispered, "From the street to this?" She looked at him, her voice soft and full of awe. "We created a new story." Austin turned to her and smiled. "It started with simple revenge and jealousy," he said, "but somehow we found the purest form of love. 9 months later, their home was filled with baby laughter. Not one, but 2. Twins, a boy and a girl." Austin joked that it was life's way of doubling every blessing they had missed. Vanessa held her babies close, sometimes crying without reason, not from sadness, but because her heart was finally full. She often stood in the nursery, rocking them gently, whispering stories of her father, of the journey, of the streets that once tried to bury her. And Austin? He was always there, changing diapers, singing lullabies, cooking breakfast while she slept. Not a perfect husband, but present, loving, real. They raised their children in a home that wasn't filled with gold, but with truth. Strength, second chances. They taught them kindness. They taught them courage. And every night before bed, Vanessa would hold her daughter's hand and her son's little foot and whisper the same words. "You were born from love that took its time." And that was enough. Because for Austin and Vanessa, that love was everything, and they had finally come full circle.